Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today, we are speaking with the co-owner of the Macro Lab, which offers macro-based meal prep to El Paso, Texas. This athlete is no stranger to business, as she has her bachelor's degree in public relations and marketing. Of course, she's currently also known as the 2024 Miss Universe champion, where she secured her pro card at her 6th national show before making her pro debut at the Patriots Challenge. Welcome to the show, Karla Grijalva. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you for having me. So excited.
I am so happy that you're here, and I'm very grateful to get to learn from you today and talk with you and shine light on your journey. So, before we do that and get into everything, I've got to ask you if there's something you think about or maybe do right before your heel hits the stage.
Oh, right before the heel hits the stage. That's a good question. Honestly, I definitely just pray.
Yeah.
I'm definitely like, please just don't let me mess this up. I
Right.
do tend to get pretty nervous. So yeah, I feel like just, staying in prayer and my thoughts kind of helps me keep composed.
Is that something that's part of your normal daily routine as well?
Yeah, for the most part. I feel like I kind of deal with a little bit of anxiety, and that kind of helps me control it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like this day is so hard for to live without having some anxiety, honestly.
Yeah,
And
that's so true. Everything causes anxiety nowadays.
yeah, well, because we have so much on our plate, and then that's part of why I personally love bodybuilding so much, because it's like that place where you can let it go. You can just focus on, well, I did one thing today that I got to have somewhat of control over and made me happy and feel fulfilled.
No, 100% agree. I feel like bodybuilding and, just going to the gym in general, like it just really helps you keep sane on your day to day. And especially if you're juggling like a million things, like a lot of females are. It definitely helps just to control the mind, be in your space for a little while, and yeah, just control that anxiety.
Yeah, for real. Well, I love to hear that you pray before you step on stage. I think that's amazing and something I'm hoping to incorporate myself this year as my relationship with God has grown a lot over the last couple of years. And I haven't really gotten to step on stage with as strong of a foundation as I have now. So I'm looking forward to that because that's something I've been immersing myself into. But I want to go back to the start of your journey because in 2013, you won the overall open bikini class and you competed every year after that until 2019, where then you took some time off before hitting a run for it in 2022 through 2024. So, can
Yeah.
you tell us more about your first experience in 2013 and how your approach to competing has evolved over the years?
Yeah, definitely. So I feel like I've, taken some time for sure, but I've definitely grown a lot with the sport. Being 2013 is like when bikini was first up and coming, and obviously we've seen it change so much over the years. For me personally, I won my first show, so I was hooked
Yeah.
initially. It was just like, wow, this is amazing. I love it and I'm good at it. What? You know?
Right.
So that's how I felt with bodybuilding from the get-go. It was definitely crazy to win that first show because for me it was like, obviously I was very unexperienced with the whole, competing in general and just presentation, you're posing and everything. I was so new to it. So to go in and win the entire show was pretty crazy and, just amazing. And then, like I said, I just fell in love with the sport and kept going and going and going. Honestly, it wasn't until you asked me to write down the list of
Yeah.
shows that I've done. I swear, I think I had like gone through them in my head. But obviously, when you have to write down, you're like, oh, wait, no, I also did this other show and this other show. And I'm
Mhm.
like, whoa, this list is like really long. I guess I just completely, fell in love with it and I just kept going and going. I took 2 years off to finish my bachelor's. And then after that, obviously I knew I wanted to get my pro card. And then that's how that went the last few years.
I was curious what was happening in those
Two
years
years.
off. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
what was going on? I didn't know if there was something specific. So you put your focus into school, basically.
Yes, I had been going to school, but I was a teen mom, single mom for a while, so it was a little
Oh.
bit of a struggle. So it took me quite some time to finish my bachelor's, and then those last 2 years is when I started doing the meal prep business in Amarillo, Texas. And I wanted to finish my degree, but I was doing both at the same time. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be able to do bodybuilding, until I'm done. And that's why I took that time off. And mostly also to grow, put on
Mhm.
muscle as well, and just kind of let my metabolism obviously take a little bit of a break and everything. So yeah, but I didn't even realize it was that long. It was also around COVID, so that
Oh
also
yeah,
took,
that changes things. It made a
yeah.
very awkward season for a lot of us.
Yeah, because I definitely prepped that year, but then it just ended up being, where there wasn't that many shows anyway. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm just gonna focus on finishing school. So
Yeah,
that's what I did.
that's awesome. I didn't know that you were a teen mom actually, and I forgive me for not doing enough research to know that. I think that's really amazing. How did that impact your life?
It was crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely crazy. Like I said, I feel like bodybuilding honestly helped me a lot in that sense as well because it helped me like keep strong and push through like a lot of, obviously personal growth and just juggling again my kids' school, being a single mom, single parent. It just really helped me build a lot of inner strength
Mhm.
and just become the person that I've become overall. But yeah, it was wild.
That is
Definitely.
wild.
Mhm.
Is there anything like that you would tell someone who's maybe they have someone who's a friend of theirs that's pregnant and they're a teenager, or maybe they were once in your shoes? Like, what would you tell them or encourage them to know?
Everything always turns out better. You always feel like, oh my gosh, everything's a struggle, or, of course, especially being a single mom, even if you're not a young mom, but just a single mom in general, like it is difficult. And I think sometimes you think, oh, it's always gonna be like this. It's really not, better days are always to come, and you just have to keep positive. Again, be very goal oriented, and again, just doing something for yourself, like I did for myself through bodybuilding and going to the gym and whatnot. It really does help. I feel like a lot of moms feel guilty for taking that time away from their children, but you need something for yourself as well in order to just continue striving to, provide better for yourself and for your kids. So in order to do that, like I said, you need to continue seeing everything on the positive, stay goal oriented, and things just get better along the way.
So, how did you even decide, okay, bodybuilding is of interest to me and I'm going to commit to it when you were a single mom? I mean, that's a major commitment of time and energy.
Yeah. Hmm.
How'd you find it and how'd you do that?
So I was going to a local gym here and I was just training or whatnot, and I basically got recruited, is what happened. They noticed I had good genetics, is what happened, and a
Uh-huh.
personal trainer basically approached me and he was like, oh, I'll train you for free and blah, blah, blah. I had been, training probably for about a year already. So I'd already kind of, seen some results and whatnot by myself. And I guess also just the part of being a teen mom, I was so young. I didn't want to just kind of like settle for a specific body, you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Mhm.
I wanted to feel confident in my skin and comfortable and everything, and just basically reestablish that confidence within myself. And that's like what the gym basically provided for me. And when he offered his services for free, I was like, okay. And
That's
it just, like I
amazing.
said, it was crazy because I just happened to be like really good at it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it was
when you
wild.
started, you actually had a lot of muscle, it seemed like. Like at least when I looked at your photos from 2013, I was like, huh. Like
Well,
you
yeah, that's actually what happens when you take free free services. The guy did not have a clue. Okay. Like, I mean, he was, okay, I suppose, but for bikini being so specific, you know what I mean? You have
yeah.
to be working with the right coaches and the right trainers. And what happened was is that my quads just blew up. Like my legs
Uh-huh.
just overpowered within the second year of my competing career. And then I ended up having to actually backtrack
That's
and
what I
bring
was
that
gonna
muscle
ask
down.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
did you have, but then it's interesting because now bikini's even bigger. So you
Yeah.
almost were like, you were what now, you had to do to earn your pro card. You were looking like pro ready even early on, but the bikini criteria kept changing, it seemed.
Yeah, I definitely did within that time span. I think 2013, 2015, maybe even 16. I still remember people would always say, oh, the look changed and now it's softer. They're going for a softer look. You know what I mean? So I feel like it was
Mhm.
still very like they weren't really sure where it was exactly headed. But yeah, I did get that from a lot of trainers and coaches that were in the game for a while that, I had good genetics. They're like, we see you getting your pro card, in no time or whatnot. But then what happened when I went to nationals was that, the judges told me your legs are too big, your quads are too big. So I had to specifically bring down my quads a notch.
Wow. Well, that's
Mhm.
also really interesting because you were very successful at the start of your career. I mean, you're still successful now, of course, but to start like that, there sometimes is this understanding that, well, then I should get my pro card. Like I can expect that. But it ended up taking you,
Forever.
yeah, not for, I mean, girl, I'm 10 years in and I don't have my pro card, so I
Really?
understand. Well, I understand there's a run that goes with it, right? Like
Yeah.
you're really having to push for it. But were there times where you doubted yourself or didn't want to continue?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, this last year before I got my pro card, prior to beginning the competition season, I literally told my husband, if I don't get it this year, like I'm done competing because, it takes a lot of energy and time, of course, a
And
lot
money?
more than people think.
Yeah.
And obviously, I have a business and everything, and I want to do other things, of course. So I was like, I'm spending so much time and energy, and if this doesn't happen now, I'm just gonna redirect, my energy elsewhere and maybe do another business or whatever. But yeah, I even prior to that, I mean, yeah, it's very discouraging when I would go to national shows and they'd be like, well, your legs are too big, or it was like the same group of girls, the very first national show that I went to. No, I'm sorry, the second one. The first one I completely bombed. The second one, it was the same group of girls, and everybody was going like pro right every show, and I was still waiting and waiting and waiting, and I was just like, oh my god, is this ever going to happen? So yeah, I definitely doubted.
Yeah. Well, that's something that I think is such a common part of the journey, but
Mhm.
sometimes it gets overshadowed by the glorious moment someone achieves the success. It's like that becomes the focus. But like you said, even your first national show, you just described it as bombing it. Like what happened at the first one compared to when you actually did win your pro card?
Mhm. So my first national show, I was in a very bad headspace. You know what I mean? I was struggling with binge eating basically. So
Mhm.
I had just won an overall, my second overall, I believe. And right after that, we had planned on doing USA's, which was probably 3, 4 months afterwards, and I ended up pulling out because I was struggling with binge eating. So I took off that season. I started doing macros, so tracking macros, and that really, really helped. But then again, the following year, I prepped for Universe, which was in June. And again, I started struggling and I pushed through and I competed in USA's, but I was struggling, so my
Yeah.
conditioning was not there at all. And it was simply because of that, I just felt so restricted, which of course, in any competition, the calories for most people have to get relatively low, especially for bikini. So, it's normal. You just have to find something that works for you where you're not constantly struggling and falling off your diet, which is exactly what happened. I was just completely falling off, every other week probably, and it obviously reflected in my conditioning. So yeah, I ended up, I believe, bottom of the barrel in that show. And then this recent show where I did win my pro card, Uh, I think, one, headspace, obviously amazing. You have to be in a good place mentally. I had already completely recovered from restrictive eating, binge eating scenarios, and I had a really good coach. So that's probably my biggest thing is you just have to hire top-notch coaches, to be
Yeah.
honest. You want to believe that your local trainer could do it, and sometimes they can, but the reality is that it's likely going to take a lot longer if you go that route. So yeah, and that kind of stung a little bit because prior to hiring my last coach, James, my husband was insisting on me hiring him like 2 years prior. And I was like,
Oh,
oh no, I want to give this coach another shot. I was so loyal and blah blah blah.
yeah.
And it just ended up, being a waste of time basically. So
Oh gosh, yeah, I can relate to that. There were times in my early journey where I'm like, I love my coaches as people, but it wasn't fulfilling what I needed anymore, but I was too loyal to move away, and I feel like it extended my
you're
time.
true. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
sucks. Honestly, it sucks because now I look back and I'm like, wow, how many times have I not done that? Like I've done that at least 3 times. And now I'm like, I'm 10 years in and I'm like, I need to like get moving and do something with my title. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, you need to honestly, I think in the long run, you're just better off hiring those top-notch coaches, even though, you might not stick around forever, but you'll definitely save some time because obviously they're at the top of their tier as coaches for a reason, right?
Well,
So
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, they just get the job done, basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think there's just more experience too. Like, of course, every coach has to get their start somewhere. I think depending on what your goals are, where you're at in your journey, that should be considered because you were already doing so well. You were on that road to pro. So you were looking for something more advanced.
Mhm.
And it is obvious it paid off for you. But I want to go back to the overeating, binge eating, the restrictive eating. You said that you switched to a macro-based diet and you also got your head in a better space. What were some of the things that you had to do or change in order to, one, switch from a meal plan mindset to a macro plan mindset, and also move through some of the maybe thought processes or patterns that was contributing to the binging and then restricting?
Yeah. So I won't say it happens overnight. Like you said, there's definitely a lot of patterns that, cause that correlation and that issue, like mentally. I basically had to take the time to obviously learn how to track, understand. For me, honestly, the minute that I heard about macros, because it was also when it was first up and coming with Violane being like the
Uh-huh.
leader. I just completely dove into it and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I didn't have to be like, sold on the whole situation. Like, I was sold the minute I learned about it. I was like, this is
Right.
amazing. If you could eat some of the foods that you truly enjoy and then obviously stick to whole foods majority of the time and reach your goals in that matter, like it made perfect sense to me, you know what I mean? So making the transition from a meal plan to macros was super easy for me just because I just thought it was like life changing. And it
Yeah.
was, honestly, it really really was for me. It has been for the longest time. And then, like you said, it was just a matter of me, like, okay, taking the time to notice these little patterns that I would go through, especially like on the weekends. I'm Mexican. So, Mexican families have terrible, terrible, like, habits, honestly, is what it comes down to. We basically have cookouts almost every weekend.
Yeah.
There's always something going on with the families. And when you go to these cookouts, it's like, plate after plate and very high fatty foods and whatnot. So I had to just kind of like step back and be like, okay, if I do go to these events, I'm going to limit myself to A, B, and C. I'm going to make sure that if I have dessert, it's a piece of dessert and that's it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're definitely still having to limit yourself. Don't get me wrong, it's not a free for all, but just understanding that once you get through that and you're able to just basically enjoy your life on a daily basis and not feel like you're losing it because you just just want to be stuffing your face. It's just so life changing, literally, that it's just easy to commit to, make those changes and just realizations of what is causing the issue and just completely eliminate them. So it does take time. I would say it took me definitely like a good year or so to completely get over it. But
Hmm.
once I did, it was completely life changing, like just so different. And then of course, once you do it for X amount of time, you don't even need to track. You understand nutrition in a whole different level that it's not really necessary anymore, and you're able to maintain a lot better.
Oh, all of those are such great points. Like, for one, just being able to enjoy social activities more because you're doing macros, I think it makes a huge difference because one, macros really teaches you about what you're looking for in the food, like the carbs, the proteins, the fats. So
Mhm.
if you can't track it perfectly, you're like for me, I remember going out for tacos with my sister and I was like, I can have this. Like
Yeah.
I can track this. Like this is something, and even though it won't be perfect, I could do it in an improvement season. And it was like, whoa, the world just like opened up and it ridded a lot of the Last Supper mentality, like this is my only time to get it in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. That's
Then you're
literally
like,
what it feels like.
it
The
does.
last
And you're like,
supper,
I
that
have,
takes it all.
yes. Like
It's
if I don't do
terrible.
it now, I'll never get it again. And it's like with macros, although like this is also a really good point you made. It doesn't mean you're not restricted. Like I work with clients on their food relationship and their body image. And one of the things that they say is, well, I follow a macro-based approach, but I'm still struggling with it. Of course, meal plans or macros, it's not going to be the bandage,
Yeah.
but when you follow a macro-based approach, I do believe it allows for more flexibility. And then, as you
Mhm.
said, trust building. Now, then you
Mhm.
learn about food and your body in a way where you can actually nourish
Mhm.
yourself without tracking everything or weighing everything because
Yeah.
you start to understand it better.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely build a level of trust with yourself to be able to go out and enjoy certain things, or simply on a day to day, like in off season or whatnot, still, hold yourself accountable to intaking X amount of protein and not having to track every single meal is so
Mhm.
amazing.
It
It's just
is.
it's really nice, honestly. That's why, yeah, for me, macros all the way. Obviously, when you're in contest prep, it's a whole different thing because digestion and whatnot. But for the most part, I would say macros for the win.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, and it's funny because in prep, you do hit that point where even following a macro approach, it turns into a meal plan because there's only so much you can fit, if you want to
Oh
call it.
yeah.
It's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, the only way I could really fit this is by eating zucchini and rice and tomatoes and the nutrient dense but maybe more predictable foods versus okay, when it's improvement season, yeah, maybe you could fit a Pop-Tart in every once in a
Mhm.
while, but you're not going to do that every day. And in prep, you're like, well, I want to use the 150 grams of carbs I have for the day strategically for my
Yeah, and
performance.
it's funny because honestly, I feel like eventually, or at least for me right now, like I literally don't even need any of those foods.
Exact. Yes,
It's just the fact
exactly.
that you have the choice. It's just as simple as that, just to have the choice. But if you look at like my fitness pal, it's like rare. Like I honestly never eat Pop Tarts at all. It's more like, oh, I want to have an English muffin once a week. I can.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's just
I
the
do.
tiniest things that make such a huge change.
It really does because what we find normally is when you give yourself the freedom to choose, you're more likely to make the choice that's more suitable long term and
Mhm.
for your health. Whereas when you're told no, it's like the toddler challenge that was famous in 2020.
Yes.
You're
Oh
like,
my gosh. Yes.
here's this bowl of candy, don't touch it while I'm out of the room. And now they're like, I must have it. That's what
That's all
it's
I want.
like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally. Especially post show. You know what I mean? That was always my struggle post show. It was like, oh my gosh, I've been restricted for 16, 20 weeks and now all I want is chocolate. And I vividly remember sitting there with a bag of chocolate. And instead of like what I would do now is take a portion and be done with it, I was like stuffing my face with the chocolate and I
Yeah.
could not stop. And I literally think that's the biggest difference with macros is that now, like, because you can have a tiny portion and like be done with it, you don't need to stuff your face like a crazy psychopath,
Right.
basically.
Yeah, it normalizes all the foods. It puts them on the same playing field. It kind of reduces some of the labels to it and allows you to be more free. I mean, honestly, for me, the most transformative part about switching to macros was I could add sauce to my food. I was like,
Sauce. Oh,
I was
that
like,
sucks.
wait, I can actually do that? Like, I can dip my chicken into ketchup?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
this is amazing. Or I could add soy sauce, whereas before it was like, well, I did it. I don't know, it's not on my meal plan. But now it's like I get to experience my food more. And I know that this is also close to home for you. I mean, you're kind of biased given you own a macro-based meal prep
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
But
A
I'm
little bit.
sticking to it too because I'm like, well, yeah, I totally agree and support this. So, is this part of what inspired you and your husband to create the business?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said, when we first started, originally it was in Amarillo, Texas, and that was 7 years ago, going on 8. And that's right around the time that I switched to macros. And
Yeah.
once I like figured it all out, and I had already been using macros for I would say about 2 years, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like people that don't want to be, eating plain chicken and rice would absolutely love this idea. And it just so happened that my husband is a pretty good cook. And he's the one that started
Awesome.
getting very creative. Yeah. And making like all these awesome recipes. And I was like, people would totally love this because they could eat healthier and not feel restricted. They don't want it. Not everybody wants to eat plain chicken and rice. You know what I mean? And yeah, that's how it started. And we just kind of ran with it. Yeah, it's done really well. But we do definitely still get, person here and there where they'll be like, are you sure this is healthy? You know? And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, yes, it is. Yeah.
Well, that's the best feedback you can get because then you're really transforming people's lives. A lot of people associate a healthy lifestyle with boring, plain diet-like food, but it really can be so nourishing and flavorful and warm and pleasing, I guess you could say, to the palate. So when you get that feedback, it's probably really gratifying to know now this is a person who's more likely to sustain a healthy lifestyle.
Yes, exactly. And we definitely get customers telling us that all the time. Like, I have finally been able to stick to it and I've lost, X amount of weight thanks to you guys because I don't get bored of what I'm eating. And we do change the menu weekly, so that also helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, it is nice to know that we're helping people that maybe would have never probably changed their lifestyle, do so and probably doesn't even feel like a huge, huge lifestyle change.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you've been running this business now for a long time, which is
Mhm.
an incredible accomplishment. So, what do you attribute the success of your business to? Like, is it that word of mouth and people coming back? Is it the creativity efforts, or what is it?
Honestly, I think it's a lot of everything, right? You have to have the right product for one, know how to market it too, and the food has to be good or they won't come back, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think it's a lot of everything. I think more than anything, marketing, a lot of businesses don't people take it for granted basically, even like local restaurants that I see, and I feel so bad because they go out of business in 1 or 2 years, and I'm like, it really comes down to your marketing more than anything. Like every single business you need to have pretty strong marketing skills. Thankfully I got a degree on it.
I was gonna say,
So
is this where you apply your degree?
yeah, I did. And I always say, I spent X amount of years in school and I don't even actually use my degree, but no, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Technically, I do, so yeah, I do feel like that makes a huge, huge difference. Obviously, having a bodybuilding background also helped. People felt like, oh, she does it and I could trust what she's saying and she knows how to help people lose weight. So all of that helped, word of mouth for sure.
Mhm.
And then again, as we grew and got better, we have very amazing cooks now. We have well experienced, cooks that actually went to school to culinary school for it. And now we basically just create the recipes, adjust the macros for them, and obviously their food is way better than our my husband and ours. Yeah, I mean, it's just thankfully it's done really well.
That's awesome. Yeah, like when I make, this is such a silly example, but when I make ground chicken, I'm like, it's kind of dry. But when my husband, who literally went to culinary arts school,
Really?
makes it,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, it's different. You didn't add oil, did you? He's like, no, just don't get it into small chunks like you do. And I was like, but then I try that and I still don't get it right. I'm like, I don't understand. It's like they got the magic touch or something.
No, it's true because literally, like, I'll come home and make, whatever protein. I'm like, yeah, mine's dry.
Yeah.
I'm like, mine does not taste like my cooks. I was like, I need to go get some over there. And even when my husband makes it, I'm just like, why is there so much better than mine?
Right.
But yeah, they're just better cooks.
Yeah, it's so funny. So, how does the macro lab work in comparison to other companies? Because I know some companies like you could just order the meals, but yours is macro based, right? So, how does that actually work from a customer perspective?
So we create, like I said, different recipes, right? So we have usually about 18 to 20 items on the menu. And we basically just balance the macros for people. So, for example, one, obviously, we all know don't ever cook with oil, which a lot of people, especially in Mexican culture, they really fail at that. But yeah, we don't cook with oils. And then I make sure that the portions are as best as possible for general public, right? So obviously I can't accommodate for everybody all at the same time, but I do the best that we can. So for the most part, you're always going to see majority of our meals under 30 carbs, which is a decent serving, right?
Mhm.
Protein anywhere from 20 to 40 grams of protein, and then the fats are going to be, anywhere from 2 to 8 grams depending on the protein type, of course. But yeah, it's just about basically balancing, the macros like we would in a meal plan. When I create a meal plan for a client, I'm making sure obviously everything's like somewhat balanced and, at least well tasting for them, right? It's the same thing we do at the lab. We do some customs, so we'll have some customs, and the customer could always go in on the website and ask for like 6 or 8 ounce portions for a meal, for example. But yeah, we'll basically have some items where they're on the lower end of carb ratio or fat ratio, and then we have some options that are a little bit higher for like maybe the male that's, taller and huskier or whatnot. So yeah, we try to, like I said, have a variety of a lot is what we basically do. And yeah, just kind of, keep it changing every week so that people don't get bored.
Are there any meals or dishes that are like signature to you guys or like that y'all are really known for?
Yes, our enchiladas.
Really?
So
That
that is
sounds
a Mexican dish,
amazing.
obviously. Yeah, which is hilarious. But we don't make it like the usual, like rolled. It's a
Okay.
casserole. And that one, actually, my husband came up with that one. It wasn't even our culinary cooks. That goes way back from when we started in Amarillo. And yeah, it's a layered casserole. And literally in Amarillo, Texas, and here in El Paso, where there's more Mexicans, everybody loves it. Like that's always been our top seller.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, would you say that your niche or maybe like the type of customer you attract, is it mostly people who are already into fitness or is it everybody?
No, I think it's everybody because, like I said, it's not boring food. You know what I mean? So we even get elderly people that are just trying to, clean up their diet. Maybe their doctor is telling them, hey, we need to bring the blood pressure down, that kind of thing. We get a lot of elderly people trying to do that. We get young customers as well that, are starting to get into the gym and whatnot. We get the bodybuilders, literally all sorts of people. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's definitely a wide range. The cool thing about it too is that because it's macro based, we basically stay pretty relative all year. You know what I mean? It's easier, like we already know, it's easier to stick to a diet that you're actually enjoying all year round versus only doing it during the summer and then falling off.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so nice to be able to have a company that you also can trust, like you said, because you see that they practice what they preach too, and
Yeah.
that, okay, that person who's making the food is looking pretty dang good. Like, I will trust that they, if they're
Yeah.
eating it, it must be okay. Which leads me to one of my questions is when you got your IFBB Pro status, did you notice an uptick in business or was it like, did it not make much of a difference?
No, it really doesn't. And I've gotten that question a few times, honestly. since I got my program, and now it's the same. I
Yeah.
think people just, I mean, once they realize I'm a pro, they're like, oh, that's cool, you know? But I think for people more, I think just the fact that you're in bodybuilding and you've been doing it for so long, you know, that's really all they care about. I don't think the pro status really made a difference at all.
I think not a lot of people, unless they're in the bodybuilding community, really understand what it is. They're
Yeah,
like,
that's
okay,
exactly it. That's exactly it. People that are not in actual bodybuilding and haven't been for like years to understand, you know, how hard it is
yeah.
for one and the significance that it holds. Yeah, they don't get it. They're
Hmm.
like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, so you do like flexing on stage? You're like, yeah, yeah. So that's
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. They're just like, oh, and you have to wear that weird tan, right?
yeah. Why do you have to
I
do
know,
that
yeah.
anyway?
Yeah, basically, I don't know. I guess they just see it as part of like a, you know, literally like a show. You know,
Yeah.
they don't realize that it truly is like, you know, a huge sport and it requires insane amount of discipline. So,
Uh-huh. One of the interesting things to me is like, just as a sidebar, but like bodybuilding, it seems as though everybody, when you say it, they still think of Arnold. They still think of that golden era.
mhm.
And it's interesting. The reason I think that's interesting is because only maybe recently with like I would say Chris Bumstead have we seen a little bit more general population knowledge, but even that is still I don't know, it's just different. And I don't know that general population really has an understanding that bodybuilding is in like its even better era now. Like it touches so many more lives and it's grown and there's a production value that's even greater. But it seems like when you reference bodybuilding, that's generally the mindset that people go to.
Yeah, I think they think it's still just small shows, you know, here and there, and they don't realize how much the sport has grown. And like you said, you know, it attracts so many people now. Obviously, you know, the Olympia and Arnold, like so many people show up to those events. Like,
Yeah,
you know, people love this. I always
exactly.
tell people, oh yeah, the Olympia, it's like the Super Bowl, you know, oh, okay, now I get it.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So you run the business with your husband, and I
Mhm.
think your guys' support for each other is so beautiful. I
Oh,
love,
thank you.
yeah, I stalked his page a little bit in preparation
He
for this.
hardly posts. He's terrible.
But when he does post, it's usually about you, and it's so
Aw,
sweet. So
that's cute.
I was like reading, I was like, that's so awesome. So I wanted to hear from you. How has he played a role in your success through competing and life, and how has that unwavering support looked? Like, what is it that you like? How do you know you have that support? What does that look like?
Well, I believe, well, for one, just showing up for you, you know, and then also just being okay with everything that it requires because he wasn't in the bodybuilding scene when I first started. He
Hmm.
just recently began bodybuilding like 5 years ago. So, yeah, you know, you have to give up a lot. You know, there's not a lot of social events and going out, and even date nights obviously get limited, especially towards the end. So, it's basically being okay with all of that and what it requires. For my husband specifically, he has always been an athlete. He was not a bodybuilder forever, but he was always an athlete in soccer growing up. So he actually made it to the Olympics in Mexico as well
Whoa.
as a soccer player. And then
Wow.
he did MMA for like 3, 4 years. So he's always been a well-rounded athlete. And he's always had a big athlete mentality. Honestly, my mentality of like not giving up sort of thing definitely stemmed from him because he was always the one there like pushing me like no, you know, don't give up. And then also like when I'm doing cardio, you know, when cardio gets tough and it's already up there, he's like just do it, just get it done, don't think about how you feel. So he's always been the one to kind of be like in the back of my head just pushing me to be better, you know what I mean? So yeah, he's just always had that mentality, and I think that's definitely been like a huge help because I definitely was not an athlete growing up.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I was never an athlete. So I was definitely like, oh my God, you know, once it got tough, I was like, am I really gonna be capable of doing like that much cardio and stuff? And he was always just like, get it done, you know?
Hmm.
So yeah, it was huge. I definitely think that if he wouldn't have been around, probably like somewhere in the middle, I probably would have given up a lot sooner.
How did you guys
Yeah.
meet?
We actually met at a sales job. We were
Really?
both doing sales. Yeah. And we both definitely have that personality, I think. And we were like very competitive against each other at the point. And then we just kind of ended up dating and then yeah, it just worked out.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. If you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, but yeah, it's definitely a huge help. A lot of people that are in bodybuilding and might not have that support. Like I talk to people sometimes and they're like, well, I'm still trying to work it out, but they're not very supportive with it or they don't understand it. It's either gonna end up where they end up, not no longer doing bodybuilding, the person trying to, or they break up, one or the
Mhm.
other. Like you definitely have to be all in, I think,
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
the women who I've spoken with who they don't have the husband support, even if um they continue to compete regardless, and maybe they've accepted they don't have that support, I noticed that it seems a little bit more like like a lonelier journey for them.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, for sure. I think I've only met one person actually that has told me that she doesn't have that support in nationals. Actually, she got her pro card that year. I
that's
was so happy
amazing.
for her. Yeah, I was so happy for her because I met her backstage, right? And she did tell me that her husband was not supportive or whatnot. And I, obviously follow her on Instagram now. And yeah, I would say that it does look lonely, because I'm like every single show that I've been to, my husband's always there. He's always there. So I can't imagine, going out there by yourself. Like, yeah, I feel like if it was me, I'd probably be holding on to some resentment.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's probably because you have seen and felt the difference it makes to have your husband there, that for you to think of him not being there, it'd be like, well, that's strange.
Weird. Yeah, for sure.
Now, at shows, do you do your own tanning and makeup and like how do you put your package together?
So no, I honestly do not trust myself with any of it. I'm like, no, I rather just pay for it. I've been curious about the self tanning because I feel like obviously it would take a lot of stress away. Like I said, I'm a
Uh-huh.
very anxious person,
Yeah.
so the least stress I feel like would be amazing. So I think I'm gonna try it this year. Honestly, I think I am gonna try it. The makeup, no, I just know I'm not good at it. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's just not one of those things that I could personally do. I've tried like watching YouTube videos and
hmm
whatnot. And again, it would be amazing to be able to do it on my own, but no, I rather just pay for it.
Yeah, I know. Well, and it's funny, I haven't had this conversation in a while on the podcast, and I was like, I really should talk to someone about this because I know there's people who probably wonder, like, what are we doing these days? And like I've done the Protan DIY. I love
Yeah,
it,
you do.
honestly. Oh
Oh my
yeah, I
God.
do.
Like everybody says that, but I'm still scared.
I would be scared too. And I'll be honest, I missed the mark on a couple of my DIY tans as far as getting dark enough. I am a
Mhm.
ghost, as you can see. And um, to get dark enough, it was very difficult for me. I actually ended up running out of product and then I had to get sprayed at my final show at North Americans, but that worked out better for me. It was still a Protan product, thank goodness, just because I had Protan on my skin from the show I did the week prior. But what helped me with the DIY is like practicing it myself, but what I wish I would have done differently, was actually speak with Alyssa sooner and have her give me like an exact protocol for what to follow based on my skin in lighting like this, maybe. Because yeah, I underestimate how dark I needed to be, and I think that's pretty common when people start doing DIY.
Yeah, I'm pretty white too, honestly. Like my body tends to be like very, very ghostly white too. So I think that's probably why I'm also nervous. I would definitely have to try it before and then see how it works out.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you can get it down, it sounds amazing because you don't have to be running around so much. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess pros
Yeah.
and cons, pros and cons.
It's so much pros and cons. Like I've even been considering this year if I'm gonna do it or not because of those reasons. I'm like, well, I don't know if I know if I do the show tan I can get dark enough, but I also like when I did the DIY, it was so not, there was no stress, there was no cold fans, there was no
Really? Yeah, I hate
it,
that.
yeah, it was just easy and like it took such a short period of time, like literally just done. So, and I felt like it had more staying power, which I kind of liked being a little bit like tan like all over.
Yeah, I like it too, honestly. But well, you know how they say you have to take it off, or I saw this tip actually
Yeah.
by Ashley. She said take it off as soon as you get home because if you have another show, it's not gonna stick on as well, which is true, but usually I like to keep it for like a couple weeks. But yeah, last year when I saw that and I did have another show, I was like, okay, I'm gonna scrub, 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 you know?
It was so smart. Yeah,
Mhm.
I like the tan removers for that reason. But and with the makeup, I mean, I think paying to get it done if you're not comfortable with it is always such a great thing. Is there like a particular look you have found for yourself, or do you always just tell the makeup artist to just do what they do?
Yeah, I usually always tell them to do what they do, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Just because I've noticed everybody likes to go very deep on my eyebrows. And I'm like, man,
Uh-huh.
I don't like them that thick. You know what I mean? So sometimes I do have to go fix it a little bit. But for me, it's the eyeshadow. Like I can never do that type of eyeshadow. You know what I mean? It's just so much talent. So
Yeah.
no, I usually just have them do what they want to do. Or if I have like maybe a reference look and I'll take them that kind of what I'm, in the mood for. And if I need to fix anything, I just try to do it very quickly.
I love it. Yeah, the eyebrows thing is always a shock to me because I'm like, I'm not used to seeing my eyebrows dark at all. And I get it when they do it, I feel better. But when I do it, I'm like probably very light on the eyebrows. I've seen in some of my stage shots. I'm like, I could do
No,
better.
yeah, and that's the risk that you take too. If you try to adjust something, maybe it looks a little weird, there, but on stage, it looks better. So I'm like, damn it, they had it right the first time.
Yeah.
So no, I have yet to nail my look. I'm still working on it. I feel like for Universe, everything just like fell in line and everything came out so perfect. And then I
Mm.
tried to replicate it for my pro debut and it just didn't. I don't know
Really?
why the stars were not aligned.
That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
because I did everything pretty much the same. Um, yeah, everything was the same. My hair was the same. It was the same. Well, it was the same team. It was a different makeup artist, but I gave her the same look, and it just didn't look the same. I was definitely way too lean for that show, so that might have played a role. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the stars have to align sometimes.
Oh
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
no, for
No, you know what
sure.
I saw? Laura Lee literally goes the day prior and has them do a trial run or whatnot. I think a day or two. I'm like, wow, that's genius. Honestly, I think that would be worth paying for,
Wow.
for
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if they'll do it for everybody, but hey, it's worth asking. Like it maybe if they're in town soon enough, get one of their girls to try it,
Yeah.
to try doing a trial run. And I just feel like it would eliminate the nerves, because for
Good
me, I do
point.
get nervous. I'm like, oh, what if I don't like it? Because that does happen.
Yeah.
So I would be, willing to try that.
I think that the most surprising thing to me is what we think will look good versus what does. Like I've got like the last two shows, like I did my, or not last two, but multiple shows, I did my own makeup, but I've gone way too light on the lip. Like I look at it on stage, I'm like, it needs to be deeper. Like the most I've liked is when it's deeper, but I haven't nailed it. So this year I might actually just treat, I'm like, this might be my last year. I might just treat myself to get everything done for me, you know?
No, you should. No, but I agree because naturally, like on a day to day, I like a very natural lip. And no, on stage, I noticed that too. I was like, whoa, no, I can't even see my lips. And I tried
Yes.
going like pink where I would never do that. And it looked so nice. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, now I know. So I got the
Yeah.
lip part down.
Good. And what about the suit? Like, are you thinking of keeping the suit that you have? Are you going to change it up?
I do like change personally. Honestly, I always like to try new things. And I purchased a posing suit that was like a teal color because I was kind of maybe I would do like kind of like this actually, like a
Yeah.
bluish teal. And I didn't like it. And I was like, oh, great. So that's kind of what I like to do actually. I'll try on like just a regular bathing suit of the color that I'm kind of thinking of. And that has been very helpful. But
Smart.
yeah, the last time I did purple, and then I ended up switching for my pro debut, I switched it up a little bit, but it was just like a tad difference. It wasn't like a huge, huge difference. But now I'm thinking I want to try going back to red because I've done red in the
Yeah.
past. So I might do that.
That's awesome. I think it's
Mhm.
fun to try different things. And like,
Yeah.
I've gotten consistent feedback, like purples and blues are up there, but we're trying something kind of new this year. So I'm excited for that. But I want to get into some of the more maybe controversial parts of your journey, if you're cool with it.
Yeah, sure.
Um, so first of all, I want to go to the 5-month transformation posted and shared by your coach and yourself. That was like mind blowing, honestly. Um,
So, yeah, I was working with James last year, right?
uh-huh.
And yeah, it was crazy. I will say that James is like amazing at, like I said, getting the job done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I worked with him 2022, and then yeah, I had to reopen up my second meal prep here. So I didn't compete 2023, I believe it was, and then 2024 I worked with him again. So yeah, right now I did switch, so he's
Yeah.
not my current coach.
But that was pretty impressive. And I think your journey just has changed a lot of the years, as you've said. So, what has gone into some of the decisions you made? Because you had said you felt like the previous, not James, but the previous coach was a waste of time, kind of a mistake. But also, you've shared was a mistake to stay natural as long as you did. So,
Yeah,
when I read that
which
in your form, I was like,
I know. And I've
whoa,
said it a couple times on Instagram, which is why I was like, well, might as well share it here too,
yeah,
because I have been vocal about it on Instagram. Which is funny because I don't know if I want to name drop too much, but the
yeah.
coach that I was working with prior to James is very on the natural, natural, natural. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Which he's amazing. Don't get me wrong. He's an accomplished coach as well. Um, and I worked with him, what, 2, 3 years, I believe, and I learned so much from him as a coach for lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, being natural is amazing, right? Thankfully, I had very good genetics to be able to build a good amount of muscle for a very long time naturally. Like
mhm.
I said, I stayed natural for 8 years of my competition season. But like I said, I did come to a point where I was like, okay, bikini standard now. You know what I mean? That's where I was when I was with that coach. I was like, this is not looking like it's gonna line up, like, and I was already getting to a point where I was starting to get frustrated because I had already competed in like what 4 national shows, I believe. So I was already getting frustrated and I was kind of like, hey, can we try something else or can we at least get aggressive with like my fats? Because over the years you start learning your body as well. And yeah, I obviously diet on my own as well when I'm in off season or maybe like the years that I didn't compete. So I did learn more about my body on my own. And I would suggest that to him, and he didn't even want to lower my bats. And I was just
Mhm.
like, okay, there's like a line where you have to be realistic, and by no means am I saying like, oh, you should jump on all these PEDs or when, of course not. Obviously, try and maximize your own potential naturally. But if you do get to that point where you're like, okay, I've already done that and, it's not really happening naturally, and you
Mhm.
do want to become a pro, I would say, why are you going to waste time? You know what I mean? If we already know what the standard of bikini really is, and you do have to get to very, very low body fats, have a good dense amount of muscle. Obviously, for most females, the tie-in area, very difficult to do, right? You have
Haha.
to really be like very, very shredded and it requires a lot, so you have to be realistic. And again, only if you're at that point where you're like, okay, I know I want to become a pro. I know that's my end goal, which I was there like 2, 3 years prior to me deciding to take that next step. So yeah, I do feel like those 3 years were a waste of time. You know what I mean? It's like I
Interesting.
should have made that decision X amount of time ago, and I more than likely would have gotten my pro card a long time ago, you know? So
What made you want it sooner? Like when you look back and you go, well, that was a waste of time. What makes you go, well, I wish I had received it sooner than I did?
because now I'm 35.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I have 5 years to accomplish big things in my
Mm.
bodybuilding career. You know what I mean? Obviously, as a female, or at least for me personally, I don't see myself competing past 40, you
Mhm.
know? And obviously I want the time that I have spent in bodybuilding to mean something, and I'm a competitive person. I feel like most people in the sport are. We want to actually accomplish big things, right? Most of us do. So yeah, now I'm like, well, I'm 35. I wish I would have had at least 2, 3 more years where I could
Uh-huh.
have grown as a pro. You know what I mean? And
I
now I'm
do.
like, yeah, I don't have that time, so I have to make very smart decisions now. And
Hmm.
then yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm like, okay, what's gonna be the best thing for me as a pro? What and who is gonna help me grow? Put on the muscle that I need and be competitive on stage. So that's where my mindset is at. And that's where it's been the last 6, 8 months. It's like, I need to get to that point now. I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
of course, everything takes time, but you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah, I
just want to
get
make sure that I'm aligning myself with the right people in order to accomplish the right things with the amount of time that I have. If I had, 3, 5 more years in the game, then it probably would be different where I would have been more like, well, it's okay. It'll take its time, it'll do its course. But since I don't, I guess I have that mentality now where it's like I'm not willing to waste my time anymore. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I just feel like I did that with so many people throughout my time in the industry, and it just costed me time, you know.
I
So yeah,
do.
I think that's where I'm at mentally, where I'm just like, I want this to be worth something. I want to be competitive in the sport, and I have goals, and I just want to make sure that I'm able to set myself up at least to be in the best situation to be the best that I can, right? If it doesn't happen because it doesn't happen and that's not in God's plan, that's fine. But I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to, do the best that I can. Because
Hmm.
again, it's so much work, so much
It
time,
is.
so much sacrifice. Again, being a mom throughout this entire journey, I've sacrificed a lot with my family as well.
Mhm.
So if I'm going to be making those sacrifices, I want it to be worth it, you know?
If you're looking for competition heels, jewelry, and fun competitor extras, then visit shoefairyofficial.com and use code CELESTE for a discount at checkout.
Oh, yeah. Well, what are some of those sacrifices that you've made and had to make in this journey so far that maybe puts that in perspective or play for you?
Well, I think, looking back, it's like if I wouldn't have been so, indulged into bodybuilding and doing hours and hours of cardio and dieting and this and that, maybe I would have been a little bit more present when my kids were younger. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, just doing certain things that I didn't do because I was also balancing my time here and there. So yeah, those little tiny things that are, it's like, but
Yeah.
obviously it's a choice that I made, and it is what it is now. My son is about to graduate this year, and my daughter is
Wow.
a sophomore in college. So
Holy
yeah, yeah,
moly.
I know it's crazy. And now looking back, I'm just kind of like, oh, I wish I'd have done this and would have done that. But again, it just, it comes down to choices that you make in life and sacrifices that you do, again, to get ahead and be able to provide better for your family in general, which I did. But again, it came with sacrifice. If I would have been a different person, then I might have been like Angelica Texeria recently. She's like, oh, I have 2 kids and I'm 40. I think
Yeah.
that's enough with bodybuilding, which is totally understandable because you do sacrifice a lot as a parent.
And do your kids have an opinion on bodybuilding? Like, what do they think?
Honestly, they really like it. They've always been very supportive as well. Like they're like, "Oh, that's so cool." You know what I
I
mean? Like
love
they're
that.
like, "That's so cool that my mom does that." Like my son, he loves to brag about the fact that I'm a pro now.
Aw.
And honestly, they both love the gym. So that's one thing I will say that is I love that, that bodybuilding was able to give that to my children as well.
Yes.
My daughter, she's 19 and she doesn't feel uncomfortable at a gym setting. She could go to the gym on her own, train on her own. A lot of the females that I coach, they're in their 20s or early 30s and they don't feel that way, right? A
Right?
lot of them are very uncomfortable. So yeah, I'm very glad and thankful for that as for my kids that they both have established, these habits through my habits, and they understand, the importance of eating healthy and just being active in the gym and just overall living a healthy lifestyle. So that would be a good note.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Like it's interesting how sometimes the sacrifices we make here lead to beneficial wins over here. So it's like that perspective, but I hear you saying you want to make the absolute most of your career in bodybuilding because you've put a lot on the
Yeah.
line for
Mhm.
it, and there's a
Exactly.
lot riding on it. And when it came time to make the decision to use performance enhancing drugs, supplements, boutique supplements, whatever we want to call them here,
Mhm.
was it for muscle development? Was it for conditioning? Was it for dense? What was guiding that decision?
No, it was conditioning. Yeah, it was conditioning. So when I first started, dabbling into that, obviously I was on prep. I hired my coach to get on prep or whatnot. And, I've always been very bottom heavy. Like I said, the tie-in area was like not possible for me pretty much prior
Yeah.
to using, PEDs and whatnot. But yeah, it was basically just for conditioning the first couple years. This off season, I just recently started moving more in the direction of putting on more muscle. So I just barely started dabbling in that area. But yeah, for the most part, it's always been just conditioning for me.
Interesting. So, what had made you stay natural for as long as you did before you decided to switch? Was it the influence of the coach or was it something else internally?
Initially, I think it was internally me thinking like, oh, it's possible, right? I have good genetics. I've gained this amount of muscle
Yeah,
naturally. Why not try? And I
right.
did, right? And then once I started with that other coach that I was referring to, yeah, I was definitely his influence where he was like, you don't need it and blah blah blah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
like I don't know. The way the girls are looking on stage right now, because obviously you go to these national shows and you're just blown away by the conditioning of the girls there. Like, regionals is one thing, but national shows, like it's truly unbelievable until you're there. I
Yeah,
think a lot of competitors, new competitors, they think, oh, it's just going to be the next level. No,
it's
it's so
humbling.
different. Yeah, it's so humbling. And that's where I got to that point where I was like, I just don't think it's going to happen naturally. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
that's just what made me make that decision. But again, I already knew for, years that I wanted a pro card. I was
Yeah.
going to make it happen. And that's where I just made the decision like I'm gonna have to make the switch.
It's so good and important that we have these conversations because there's different perspectives, right? And there's different reasons for doing things or pursuing something. Like I'm I've been natural, I'm remaining natural, and I recognize and I felt so much hopelessness with the bikini division, to be honest with you. Like over the last couple of years, it's just felt like this moving target that I'll never reach. But when they introduced like the natural NPC shows and the upcoming natural pro qualifier, I'm like, this is my shot. I'm like, this is my shot. Let's go. And I feel good about that. But I also, for me, I've never entertained the idea of it. But for you, you were entertaining the idea of it even
Mhm.
early on. It wasn't something you had put off the table. So, with that perspective in mind, I have some questions about your experience as a natural athlete compared to not being natural. What
Okay.
have been some of the pros and cons or differences in experience?
Well, I think most people think once you, take PEDs or whatever, that it's gonna be easier. It's not. I think that's everybody's expectation. Oh, I just have to take this, and that, and I'm good to go. No,
Uh-huh.
it's still the exact same work. Like I said, for me, I've always struggled more with conditioning than putting on muscle. And it's still going to take me 20 weeks to be ready for a show. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter whether I was natural or not. It's still going to take a while for me. Um, Pros, like I said, for me, the biggest thing is that I finally saw a tie-in. That was
Hmm.
never possible, never naturally. And then I think just overall density does play a little bit of a role. Like it does look, I guess, you look more dense, it's more poppy, everything looks
Hmm.
nicer,
It's like
right?
five dimensional. Like the glutes become like
Exactly. There you
5D.
go. Yeah, because I was looking at some pictures actually not so long ago of my last national show as a natural competitor. And yeah, I mean, it's not that it's a huge muscular difference. It just you just literally look more 3D when you're
Hmm.
not natural. So yeah, I think those are the biggest difference that I could think of. As far as anything negative, I mean, you just have to be smart, one. Again, you have to have the proper guidance. That's my biggest thing because, again, I do see here locally a lot of trainers, telling their clients their first show, hey, take this, and that. That's probably one of the reasons why I did stay natural the first 5 years or whatever, 5, 6 years without it being an option, until I did start thinking, okay, it
Yeah.
might be an option because I did see locally a lot of trainers being like, oh, take this, and that to other people and the scary stories that some girls have. Terrifying. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably one of the reasons why I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So yes, you definitely have to have proper guidance with the right coach if you are thinking of going that direction because you don't want to have any of those issues, of course. So that
Yeah.
would be the biggest thing for sure. My biggest advice, at least, to make sure you have proper guidance because I just don't trust any like random local trainer anymore.
Yeah.
And I love the locals, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
there's just levels. It's just so true. There's levels.
Right. And like, I think it's a disservice. It would have been a disservice to yourself if you had started so early in your journey because you wouldn't have maximized your potential as much as
Hmm.
you did and have. And then you probably wouldn't have valued or maybe learned as much. And, uh, you know, one of my friends who was natural for a very long time and then decided to start taking PEDs and I mean, she ended up going pro like that year. Um, it was almost interesting for her and strange to be like, wow, I could have done that this whole time and gotten this result.
Yeah.
Was it strange for you to see those changes in your physique with that one implementation?
Yes, it definitely was because it's literally like okay, I might not be conditioned fully for this stage, but the changes, like I said, like the tie-in
Mhm.
specifically, right away you see it within,
Wow.
weeks. And it's just like, wow, this is amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah, in that perspective, yes, especially like I said, if you are that person where you're already at that point where, you've been trying for a long time and you've done everything in your power and you're out there at every national show, and it's not happening, then yes, it does feel like, okay, now I have a little bit more leverage, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the promotion of doing it under the right guidance, support, and safety is so key, as you said. And a lot of people, I think, can get wrapped up in, I'm going to do this because I want to achieve the pro card and the pro status, and it'll unlock all my dreams. And that's, I think, a mistake, right? I think there's got to be something deeper behind it. It can't just be that
Yeah.
you want that outcome, especially if you're willing to take risks. And I will say, bodybuilding in general is a risk. I've talked to a few coaches, they're like, being a natural competitor is sometimes more
Oh my
dangerous.
God. Yes, I'm so glad you're saying that. Honestly, it hadn't crossed my mind, but I will 100% back that. Yes. I had such a slow metabolism as a natural competitor. Like I had to kill myself on the
Mhm.
treadmill. Truly. Like, then again, trust me, even after the fact, I was still doing hours and hours of cardio because that's just what it takes for my body, but not to that degree. I
Mhm.
had completely compromised my metabolism because of the fact that I was trying to do it naturally. So, you know, I don't know if you've heard the podcast with what's her name? Oh my gosh, I can't think of her name right now, an athlete, but she talks about that, how they've already been doing basically studies on the difference between naturally competing and taking PEDs, and it truly is a lot less harsh on your body
Isn't
if
that
you do it
interesting?
right, of course, doing it the proper way, coming out of it the proper way, having the right guidance, not abusing, because that's another big one, right? It's less harsh on the body. So that's crazy, right?
I know
And I will
that's
say that my blood work, you know, perfect.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting. And
Mhm.
I'm okay. Like it's funny because me being a natural athlete, I can say that confidently that I recognize there's a risk as a natural athlete trying if you're a natural athlete in a division that is dominated.
By non-natural athletes.
Yeah. What are you
Yeah.
trying to do then? You're trying to create a very unnatural physique with natural methods, and you are pushing your body no matter what you do in bodybuilding, you're pushing it to a limit, at least in the NPC for sure. I mean, that's why it's like the best of the best from the bodybuilding standpoint. And to get to the IFBB, it takes a lot. I think it's wonderful they've opened up opportunities for athletes like myself as
Yeah.
well. And it's a weird, bodybuilding is just weird because even as a natural athlete, you are facing risks. And
I think
sometimes it could
it
be,
literally also depends on the body type, right? So if it's a
mm,
petite female, perhaps,
yeah.
and like you said, maybe, now with the new division, obviously the fit model, that's going to be awesome. Game changer for
Hmm.
a lot of petite females and the natural federations or whatnot. It is possible.
Hmm.
But yes, once you're trying to go into bikini and NPC national shows and trying to possibly get your pro card, you're gonna risk a lot as well. Because I could
Yeah.
definitely think back on after a few preps where I was doing it naturally and I felt terrible. My hormones
Yeah.
were obviously wrecked.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I think it's just about, thinking about pros and cons first and foremost. And again, making the decision whether you're willing to do that or not. For what reasons are you even striving for that, like you said?
Hmm.
Because if it's to perhaps fulfill some type of dream or you think you're gonna be able to make, maybe your income increase or whatever, no, those are not the right reasons. It has to
Yeah.
be something more like inner, right? Where it's coming from an inner drive per se, and it's truly something that you want to attain as a goal. And just some, I guess it's kind of like an NBA player where when they're going to playoffs or whatever. I've heard so many videos with like Kobe or whatnot where you just have this mentality where it's like it's gonna get done and it has to
Hmm.
get done because I'm gonna push myself to the limit and give everything that I have in order to make this goal happen. You have to have that mentality and that passion. Does that make sense? Because it's never going to
Absolutely.
be to increase your income or to increase in any sort of way like that. It's more of an inner drive, is what it is.
Mhm.
So, yeah, you have to make those decisions for sure. And then again, go back to realizing what type of body type do you have? Because if you have a more petite frame, maybe you can, maybe it is possible, especially with the new division. For me, that was not the case.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would have been possible naturally.
Well, and like Kobe said, it's love that is the common denominator among all these champions, all of these
Yes,
greats.
exactly.
It's
Yeah, like you're
love.
not doing it for Instagram, you're not doing it for, whatever, I don't know, fame and whatever other reasons that people might want, because you do see a lot of that now.
Yeah.
You know, you're not, first of all, a lot of those people that are just striving to get like Instagram followers and whatnot, they could do it without bodybuilding nowadays, right?
Exactly.
It's not necessary. Maybe back in the day, like 5 years ago, maybe it wasn't
Totally.
possible. Yeah, but nowadays it's not necessary. So it really comes down to having an inner passion and love for the sport, really.
Hmm. Now, something that I look at it as a mental health professional, I'm also like, bodybuilding in general is likely to be a magnifying glass to potential mental health struggles, concerns. It's like a amplifier. And then if you add PEDs on top of that, many of them are also known to exacerbate pre-existing mental health conditions. So I'm curious if you either have had that experience or you know other people who've had that experience, or were you worried about that potentially? Because you had said earlier you've struggled with anxiety.
Yeah, no, honestly, I don't think, I mean, maybe like one thing I could think of that does kind of raise like you have to manage your caffeine, right? Because
Mm.
otherwise you do get very like jumpy or whatnot.
Huh.
But other than that, no, I don't think I have really dabbled in that area,
Yeah.
and I haven't really heard it from anyone other than, like I said, this one thing where I'm thinking it can be controlled as long as you're not
Mm.
abusing caffeine, right? That's about the only reason I could think of my anxiety getting over the
Yeah.
top is when I'm doing like coffee, you know, doing a fat burner, energy drinks. Then I do feel myself like, oh my God,
Uh-huh.
chill. I need
Oh
to
my
start
gosh.
meditating, right? I need to start meditation. And that's probably the case the last 3 to 4 weeks because you just get nervous, right?
Yeah.
But no, I don't think it has amplified anything, honestly. But again,
Well,
it just comes down to not abusing things. Is the
Exactly.
biggest thing.
I would
Because
agree.
I talk to people that don't even compete and they'll be like, well, I'm taking this as I'm like, dude, I've never taken that. I'm like, I've
Yeah.
never touched that amount, like literally never. So when you tell people that, they're surprised because they assume that every bodybuilder is completely going nuts on a million different things. And
Yep.
that might not be the case. But again, comes down to genetics as well and not needing a ton, right?
Yeah, and I think there's so much misinformation. Like mainstream media, uh, it's like a highlight of those things. It's the highlight of the bodybuilder who abused steroids and killed her husband, and the bodybuilder who promotes her body in a sexual way online to get money, and that's what they make the stories about bodybuilding. You don't generally
Mhm.
see like bodybuilder Ashley
Changed their
Kaltwasser
life.
destroys, yeah, or like changes their life. Like you don't see that, and yet,
No, that's so true.
yeah, and oh, they took X amount of this steroid. They don't see that either. They just it's the extremes, right? So it kind of gets a negative maybe connotation attached to it, and
Yeah.
that's the perception that people have. But I love
That's
that.
so true. And, really a lot of people that I've spoken to, obviously athletes that I meet, they have nothing but good things to say, right? Like, of course, yes, like I said, it comes with a lot of sacrifices in different areas of
Yeah.
your life. But for the most part, like bodybuilding, going to the gym, everything, making those lifestyle changes really do affect you in a positive manner more
Mhm.
than anything, whether you're doing it naturally or not. Usually, all you hear from real athletes is that it has changed their life for the better.
That's
I personally don't really come across people that are like, oh, I ended up in the hospital or anything like that.
yeah.
Like I said, I think I've heard it more from like friends of my husband
Mm.
that are not even bodybuilders. They're just gym
Yeah.
goers. And then they end up abusing, X amount of drugs or even females because they think that that's what everybody's doing. But the reality is that no, you don't need to abuse any drug. You need to take it the right way, have the right guidance, and use it wisely, right?
Absolutely. And your point about not abusing it, I think, is really the key takeaway, as
Mhm.
well as considering why you're really doing it.
Mhm.
Another thing, I guess, that would be important to consider in that is you said that your health has improved, which is really amazing. Like your blood work has been great. And you said a misconception is that you just take it and everything it gets better and is amazing. But I imagine there's a lot more variables you have to track and be mindful of.
Yes, well, when you are making those decisions to, take whatever the case may be, you do have to be mindful of, like I said, your blood work for one, off the charts, first and foremost, making sure that you're in a place to even, consume anything of that nature, because some people are just realistically not healthy and not in a position to do so to start. And once you do, and let's say you are in a good position, again, just taking it the right way and not abusing it, and then
Mhm.
coming off the right way, and then running that blood work again and making sure that you are healthy. And if, maybe something is wrong, taking the right steps to fix it, right?
Yeah.
So I think, it comes down to, again, just taking the time to be knowledgeable on everything before you take anything. And even if you do have the proper coach and they're telling you, hey, this is what we're going to do. Okay, well, let me do some research first on my end
Good
because,
point.
yeah, because yes, you might be telling me that everything's going to be fine and dandy, but I should be aware of what effects come with this, right? You need
Yes.
to be like responsible enough for your own health, right? Because yes, we're hiring people and we're paying them and we're not, but at the end of the day, like it's your health and you should be
Hmm.
responsible for it. So yeah, that's my biggest thing too. I personally always do that. We're gonna take this. Okay, let me go ahead and Google it and find out what are the
Yeah.
repercussions? Is there any risk? All of that comes to play. And I think, like I said, it just comes down to being responsible for yourself and being smart enough, right? Because
Yeah.
again, it's like I'm just completely like blown away by hearing these stories of random girls that don't even compete and are willing to
Mhm.
take crazy amounts. And I'm like, wow, you do realize a lot of competitors don't even do that, right? And they're
Right.
surprised most of the time. And I'm like, how are you so surprised? Like, do you not do your own research? You know?
Yeah. So true. And you know what? I think that that is applicable to any aspect of this sport. Like even now to caffeine intake, as you said earlier,
Yeah,
like
yeah, it's true.
anyone, like all of us, we are at risk of having more anxiety as a result of too much caffeine. Or if your coach tells you, hey, start taking yohimbine and before you do fasted
Oh my
cardio.
God, that totally happened to me.
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck? And it was definitely like in mind. I
Yeah.
never liked it, honestly, which is funny because it's a natural supplement or
It is
whatnot.
an it is
Yeah.
natural, and that's what's so interesting. Like, yohimbine is it's natural, but for some people it creates because you generally to get the best effects, you're combining it with caffeine. So when you do that, then the yohimbine itself is already getting you in that like your norepinephrine is like firing. You can withstand this abuse or endurance longer, And
It never worked for me. It was the opposite. And I retained so much water with it.
yeah, some people just have a really like crazy negative effect from a mental standpoint and from a physical standpoint. So, um, but I used it in my last prep and we're implementing it now too because it's great for natural athletes, honestly, if they can
Yeah.
stand it.
I think it just depends on the person, and finding
Mhm.
what works for you. Because, yeah, my husband takes it and he's just fine. But I'm like,
Yeah.
never worked for me. I don't know.
Absolutely. So, oh, and I should clarify, if you're a natural athlete, some things that you take, you have to always check the banned substance list, especially with the NPC and the new natural shows, because some of the banned substances will include anything you might take. I don't even know the right word, but when you use a shot, for example. So make sure you review the banned substance list. Let me just make that very clear, because there's some things
That's
that,
crazy. I honestly didn't know. I think I only did like one natural show and they didn't even test for anything. So I've always been curious, are they testing at these new natural shows?
yeah,
You
they
know,
are like the
yeah.
NPC, they're doing they have a banned substance list. They're testing you, and then they also are doing polygraph testing.
Yeah, I had heard about the polygraph thing back in that day when I was doing natural. And it was only for the males at that time for bodybuilders.
Oh,
So yeah.
interesting.
It's just crazy how everything has changed so much over the years, right? And when you've been in it long enough, it's pretty crazy to see. You're just like,
Mhm.
wow, they're doing that now.
So true. So true.
That's good to know. Just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to mention that because I'm like, well, I was looking at, I mean, I think on the banned substance list for the NPC natural shows, like I think even cannabis is included.
Really? That's interesting too, because I
I
have noticed a lot of people now use what is it called? The vapes. I
Oh yeah.
mean, obviously, I know some of them can have cannabis and some of them cannot,
Right.
but I've seen a lot of competitors like, and I'm like, wow, that's a thing. And I'm assuming to suppress the appetite, possibly.
Yeah, I don't know. I know I had Hannah Devore on in the past, and she said she uses it for like focus and her workouts too.
Oh,
Now,
yeah, I've seen her post that. You're right.
yeah, and I know nothing about any of it, so I
Yeah,
don't.
me neither. Me neither. I'm not a smoker, but I just noticed that shows like everybody's carrying their little pens,
Oh
and
my
I'm like,
gosh,
"What's
yeah.
this a thing now?"
I know I do notice it at shows. I'm like, I think it's because some of them are flavored, so they have like cravings, and they're like, oh, let me
Yeah,
just.
that's what I thought. That's what I was thinking. I
Yeah,
was
I
like,
think
maybe
you're
it
right.
suppresses the appetite because that would make sense.
Yeah. So, okay, all this being said, we've covered so much, I believe, of your journey, but is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
No, you had really good questions, I think, overall.
Awesome. Okay,
Interesting
good.
questions. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Then I will get your best advice now. So, what is your best advice for somebody who's thinking about competing but hasn't yet? And then your best advice for someone who's on their road to pro?
Okay. My best advice for someone who's thinking about competing is just go for it. You're never going to know if you like it, love it, or don't unless you try it. So, yes, don't wait for the perfect time because there's never going to be a perfect time. Try it. It's definitely worth it. Like I said, it can be very, very much life changing and just overall, it brings more pros than cons, to be honest. And then for someone going in the direction of trying to achieve your pro card, Definitely hire the right people. And like I said, there is levels to this for sure. And the right people might change over time, but it doesn't mean that they weren't supposed to be in your journey at that given time, right? Because you're still going to continue to grow with these people that come into your life as an athlete. So just make sure you're taking as much knowledge from each and every person that you work with. That's the most important thing, so that you could continue to grow as an athlete and just, strive to be your best self overall.
That's wonderful advice. And everything you've shared on the podcast, like I appreciate you being so transparent and open about your journey. So, how can everybody support you and follow your journey and connect?
So my Instagram is Karla Grijalva _ IFBB Pro, and you could always follow me on there. I try and post as much as I can,
Yeah.
but life does get crazy. But yeah, I definitely like to share a lot of my journey and when I'm getting close to stage. I just started prep season, so I will be competing this summer, and I'm super excited for it.
That's so awesome. I can't wait to see you succeed and
Thank
reach your
you.
goals this year. It's going to be amazing. I'm so grateful for the time you spent with us. And I'll put all that information in the show notes page. You guys, that's always on celestial.bit/podcast. If you're listening right away, it'll be at the top of the page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the categories section. It's alphabetized. Not only will you find how you can connect with us, but you will also see a full breakdown summary of this episode. You'll see bulleted lists of the topics we covered, and you're going to see episode timestamps so you can share this with your friends, your family, your teammates, your coaches. Let them know what resonated with you, and of course, tag us as you listen or after. Let us know what you thought. It goes a long way for the podcast, but even further for the athletes. They come on here vulnerably and courageously and sometimes nervously to share.
Yeah, for sure.
So please tag us or reach out. Let us know what you thought. And thank you all for listening. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.